At my birthday party, I planned to announce my pregnancy. Instead, my boyfriend handed me a gift box. Inside was an ultrasound picture and a note. That's when I saw it. I'm leaving you, you're useless, and I deserve better. Everyone laughed as he walked away. Our friends looked at me waiting for a reaction. I just smiled because he didn't know what I could do. 3 months later, he was drunk in front of my house, screaming my name. Emma, please forgive me. I had been with Ryan for just over 3 years. He was charming and attentive. For me, actually maintaining eye contact instead of constantly looking around for someone more interesting to talk to. Things moved pretty quickly between us. By our 2-year anniversary, we were living together in a cute little place we could barely afford. Not perfect timing financially, but the rent in this city is ridiculous no matter when you move. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it felt solid. We had similar goals. Eventually buy a house, travel a bit, maybe kids someday. Ryan was always more concerned with appearances than I was. He cared about what car we drove, which restaurants we were seen at, posting the perfect pics on Instagram and X. I should have paid more attention to that red flag, but hindsight is 20/20, isn't it? Anyway, about a month and a half ago, I'd been feeling off, nauseous in the mornings, exhausted all the time. I took a pregnancy test, mostly to rule it out. We were careful, but not that careful. And then, 2 pink lines. I still remember sitting on the bathroom floor, staring at that little plastic stick like it was written in hieroglyphics. I spent about a week processing before telling anyone. My best friend Sophia was first. She brought a cocktail to our girls' night, and when I stuck to water, she knew immediately. She asked all the right questions about what I wanted, how Ryan might react, practical things like insurance and maternity leave. It helped me organize my thoughts. As for Ryan, I decided to wait. My birthday was coming up in 2 weeks, and it seemed like perfect timing. We'd already planned a small party at our house with our closest friends, and I thought it would be special to share the news with everyone I love at once. Again, hindsight, what a witch. The weeks leading up to my birthday were strange. I was dealing with morning sickness, which should really be called all-day sickness, by the way, and trying to hide it from Ryan. He didn't notice, which I attributed to him being busy. He'd been coming home later, spending more time on his phone, being a little distant. I figured he was stressed about something at work. My birthday fell on a Friday. I spent the morning setting up, while Ryan went to pick up the cake, which took him nearly 4 hours. But whatever. Our friends started arriving around 6 p.m. Sophia and her husband, our friends Aaron and Sergio, my cousin Madison who was visiting, and a few others including Rachel who I'd known since college. The party was going well. Good food, plenty of drinks, sparkling water disguised as vodka soda for me, music, laughter. I'd planned to make my announcement after cake, and I kept catching Sophia's eye across the room. She'd give me these little encouraging nods that made my stomach flip with nervous excitement. Around 8:30 p.m., Ryan clinked his glass to get everyone's attention. My heart practically stopped. Had he somehow found out? Was he going to steal my thunder? He made this whole speech about how special I was, how lucky he felt to have me in his life, all while looking me directly in the eyes. Then he handed me a small, beautifully wrapped box with a silk ribbon. The room went quiet. Everyone was watching, some with phones out, ready to capture the moment. I remember thinking it might be an engagement ring and having this split second of panic about whether I should still announce the pregnancy if he proposed. Then I opened the box. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a folded piece of paper, and the ultrasound. I opened it, confused, and read the words that are basically burned into my brain now. You cheated. I'm leaving you. You're useless and I deserve better. Your stuff will be packed by Sunday. I looked up at him, sure this was some kind of horrible joke. But his expression had completely changed, cold, distant, almost amused. Then he said loud enough for everyone to hear that we were done. That it had been fun, but he'd outgrown me. And then he laughed, like actually laughed. A few people in the room laughed too, clearly thinking this was some kind of prank we'd planned. But then Ryan turned and walked out the front door without another word. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, note in hand, pregnancy announcement dying in my throat, while our friends looked between me and the door, waiting for someone to yell, "Just kidding," but nobody did. Sophia was the first to move. She crossed the room, took the note from my hand, read it, and muttered that he was an absolute bastard. Then everyone started talking at once. Confusion, concern, outrage on my behalf. And me? I just smiled. Not because I wasn't devastated, I was. Not because I wasn't humiliated, I absolutely was. But because, in that moment, I realized something crucial. Ryan had no idea what was coming. He thought he held all the cards. He thought he'd orchestrated this perfect exit, this public execution of our relationship, where he got to be the powerful one. But he didn't know I was pregnant with his child. He didn't know that I'd found his secret credit card statements and debt statement 3 weeks earlier when I was looking for a stamp in his desk drawer. He didn't know that I'd already seen the texts on his Apple Watch when he was in the shower. He really should have set up two-factor authentication, and most importantly, he didn't know that I'm not the kind of woman who falls apart when pushed. I'm the kind who gets strategic. So I smiled. I thanked everyone for coming. I assured them I was okay, I wasn't, and that they didn't need to worry about me, they did. I even cut the birthday cake Sophia had brought and passed out slices as if celebrating the end of something rather than mourning it. Maria left almost immediately, claiming she felt sick. Interesting timing, right? Don't worry, we'll get to her. The others stayed, helping me clean up and offering places to stay, shoulders to cry on. Brian Koberger for murder. Kidding, mostly. By midnight, everyone was gone except Sophia, who insisted on sleeping on my couch despite my protests. Once we were alone, I finally broke down. The pregnancy, the betrayal, the humiliation, it all came crashing down at once. Sophia just held me and let me sob, not trying to fix anything with empty reassurances or those annoying everything happens for a reason platitudes people love to throw around when they don't know what else to say. When I finally calmed down somewhere around 12 midnight, I told Sophia about the pregnancy. She wasn't even surprised, said she'd suspected from how I'd been acting lately. Then I showed her the credit card statements with hotel charges, expensive restaurants, and jewelry purchases that had mysteriously never made their way to me. I scrolled through the screenshots I'd taken of text to M with heart emojis and plans to meet when I was working late. We both knew exactly who M was, especially after Maria's Thompson exit from the party. We stayed up talking until dawn, weighing options, making plans. Sophia asked about telling Ryan about the baby, but I was firm. He already found out, and he even shoved that ultrasound pic in my face like I'd betrayed him or something. But now it's on my terms when I'm ready, not a second sooner. As for his thing with Maria and all those money lies, I wasn't gonna stoop to his level with petty revenge. I'd just make sure the truth came out, every bit of it. Sophia looked at me, half worried, half impressed as I spilled my plan. She said I get kinda scary when that determined look hits my eyes. I just laughed. A real laugh, the first one since opening that awful box. That night, as I lay in bed alone for the first time in years, one hand resting on my still flat stomach, I made 2 promises. One to my unborn child, that I would provide a stable, loving home no matter what. And one to myself, that I would emerge from this stronger than before. Ryan thought he was writing the end of our story with that cruel note. And if there's one thing I've learned from all those true crime podcasts I listened to while doing laundry, it's that the best revenge requires patience, planning, and a clear head, all 3 of which I had in abundance. Next time I'll tell you what happened in the days and weeks after, including how I confirmed exactly who he left me for. Spoiler alert, it wasn't a surprise, and the first signs that his grand exit strategy weren't working out quite as planned. First update. Hey Reddit, Emma here with the promised update. First, thank you so much for all the supportive comments on my last post. It's weird how strangers on the internet can sometimes be kinder than people you've known for years, isn't it? So where did I leave off? Right, the birthday party from hell. Ryan had just walked out after publicly humiliating me, leaving me shell-shocked with a pregnancy I hadn't told anyone about except Sophia. Let me pick up from the aftermath. The next morning I woke up to the smell of coffee and pancakes. Sophia was still there, bless her, acting like nothing had happened while simultaneously checking on me every 5 minutes. She kept insisting I eat something, obviously concerned about the baby. I managed a few bites before the nausea kicked in. Morning sickness is such a joy. Ryan didn't come back that Sunday, which was both a relief and torture. I spent most of the day alternating between numbness, rage, and this weird detached sense of planning. I made lists. So many lists. Financial stuff I needed to sort out, doctor appointments to schedule, people to inform. It was like my brain went into survival mode, focusing on practicality to avoid confronting the emotional hurricane. Sophia helped me pack up some of Ryan's things. Not everything, just enough to make it clear I wasn't planning on him coming back. The whole time my phone was blowing up with messages from our friends. Most were supportive, confused, wondering if I was okay. A few were from mutual acquaintances who seemed more interested in gossip than my well-being. and noticeably absent from the concerned chorus. Maria. Remember her from the party? The one who suddenly felt sick and left? Monday morning arrived, and with it, reality. I called in sick to work, something I never do. I also made an appointment with my doctor to confirm the pregnancy and discuss options. Around noon, while I was researching tenant rights since the apartment lease had both our names, I got a text from Ryan. I'll be by at 6:30 p.m. to get my things. Make sure you're not there. The audacity, right? I stared at that message for a solid 9 minutes before responding with a simple no. Just that. No explanation, no alternative suggestion, just a firm boundary. He immediately called and I immediately declined. Then I called Sophia, who rallied the troops. By 6:30 my apartment was filled with friends. Aaron, Sergio, Madison, who extended their visit, and a couple of others. A protective barrier of people who loved me. Ryan showed up at 8 on the dot, and his face when he saw the welcoming committee? Priceless. He tried to act tough, demanded to know what was going on, but Aaron, who's like 6 feet 4 inches and built like a brick wall, just handed him one suitcase with some clothes and essentials. Aaron told him firmly that the rest of his stuff would be available when he arranged a proper time and showed some basic human decency. For now, this was all he was getting. Ryan tried to catch my eye where I sat on the couch, deliberately calm. He started saying something about how this was ridiculous and to just let him get his things. I finally spoke directly to him, telling him he should consider himself lucky I hadn't changed the locks yet, and we could discuss the rest of his belongings once I'd had time to process his lovely birthday surprise. He started to argue, but something in my expression must have warned him off. He took the suitcase and left, but not before muttering something about me always needing an audience. Rich, coming from the man who dumped me in front of all our friends, don't you think? After he left, I cried again. Not for him, but for the future I thought we'd have, for the plans that now needed rewriting, for the child who deserved better than a father who could be so cruel. The next morning I called a locksmith and had the locks changed. Now about Maria. I had my suspicions from the moment she bolted from the party, but I needed confirmation. It came from an unexpected source. Sergio texted me Monday evening to let me know that Ryan and Maria had been seeing each other. He and Aaron had spotted them together 4 months ago but couldn't be sure it wasn't innocent. He apologized for not telling me sooner. It was like being punched in the stomach and simultaneously feeling vindicated. I'd known Ryan was cheating, I just hadn't known with whom. Finding out it was Maria, someone who had been in my home, eaten my food, accepted my friendship, that was a special kind of betrayal. Instead of confronting either of them, I decided to wait, watch, gather information. Maybe I've been listening to too many true crime podcasts, but patience really is key in these situations. Over the next week, I focused on practical matters. I officially confirmed my pregnancy, 10 weeks along. I spoke with a lawyer about the apartment lease and division of assets. Thankfully, we weren't married, so no divorce drama. I froze our joint credit card and opened a new bank account in just my name. Basic protection stuff. What I didn't do was tell anyone except Sophia about the pregnancy. Not yet. It wasn't denial, it was strategy. I needed to get my ducks in a row first. A month after the birthday disaster, Ryan texted again, asking to talk things through and collect more of his belongings. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near our apartment. A public place, daytime on my terms. He looked terrible, which gave me a little jolt of satisfaction. I'm not proud of it. Unshaven, circles under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled shirt. He launched immediately into what I can only describe as a half-assed explanation. He'd been unhappy for a while, felt trapped, thought a clean break would be easier for everyone. I let him ramble for a while before I simply asked if Maria was making him happy. The look on his face. Priceless. Pure deer in headlights shock. He stumbled through denials that were so transparent I almost laughed. I cut him off and told him I knew about Maria, about the hotel charges on his secret credit card, about the jewelry he bought her with money we supposedly needed for rent. I asked him to just be honest for once. He deflated like a punctured balloon. He tried the "it's not what you think" line, but I cut him off again. I told him what mattered now was that he could collect the rest of his things, that Friday at 2 p.m. Aaron would be there to supervise. And after that, I didn't want to hear from him unless it was through my lawyer. His voice actually squeaked when he repeated, "Lawyer." He insisted we didn't need lawyers and could work things out ourselves. I stayed calm even as my heart raced. I told him we were past that point, that he'd made his choice very clear at my birthday party, and I was just respecting it. As I stood to leave, he grabbed my wrist, not hard but desperately. He asked about the apartment, specifically how I was going to afford it alone, saying my job barely covered half the rent. And that's when things clicked into place. The real reason for his concern for this meeting. It wasn't about closure or collecting his things, it was about money. See, what Ryan didn't know or conveniently forgot is that I'd been covering more than half the rent for the past year. His income had been drying up, his position more precarious than he admitted. He'd been living beyond his means, using my steady income as a safety net while presenting himself as the primary provider to our friends and apparently to Maria. I smiled sweetly and told him I'd manage, adding that, unlike some people, I actually save money instead of spending it on hotel rooms and jewelry. The color drained from his face. He knew I knew everything. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Not because I'd won some relationship battle, but because I finally saw Ryan clearly for who he was. A man who cared more about appearances than substance, who lied to make himself seem more successful than he was, who abandoned me when I no longer served his narrative. Saturday came, and as arranged, Aaron supervised while Ryan collected more of his stuff. I made myself scarce, spending the day at a prenatal yoga class. Highly recommend for anyone dealing with stress during pregnancy, by the way. When I returned, the apartment felt emptier but somehow more mine. I started rearranging furniture that evening, reclaiming the space. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a new routine. Work, doctor appointments, prenatal vitamins, careful budgeting. I wasn't just surviving, I was planning for a future that looked different, but not necessarily worse than what I'd envisioned before. As for Ryan and Maria, well, their romance wasn't exactly thriving. Through the grapevine. Through Sergio, who heard from his cousin who works at the restaurant where they frequently argued in public, I learned that Maria was growing increasingly unhappy with her prize. Apparently, Ryan had painted himself as much more financially stable than he actually was. Big surprise, right? The first real crack appeared about a month after our coffee shop meeting. I was at the grocery store, carefully comparing prices on prenatal vitamins, when I literally bumped carts with Maria. She looked startled, then guilty, then defiant in rapid succession. She greeted me awkwardly, saying I looked good. I replied that she looked tired, and she genuinely did. She had that same stressed expression Ryan had worn at the coffee shop. An awkward silence stretched between us until she blurted out that Ryan had told her we were separated already when they started seeing each other. According to her, he claimed we were basically done, just living together until the lease ended. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She stumbled through what might have been an attempt at justification, or maybe an apology, saying she wouldn't have gotten involved if she'd known we were still together. I finally told her it didn't matter now, that she had him and should enjoy it. As I turned to leave, she called after me, saying he wasn't what she thought, that he promised things he couldn't deliver. I looked back at her. This woman I'd once considered a friend, now diminished by her own choices. I simply told her that sounded like a personal problem that I couldn't help her with. About 6 weeks after the birthday party, I started showing a little bump, but unmistakable to anyone looking closely. I decided it was time to be more open about the pregnancy. I told my boss first, who was amazingly supportive, offering flexible hours for my 3rd trimester. Then I gradually told other friends and family. Word travels fast in social circles. I knew it would eventually reach Ryan, but I wasn't hiding anymore. This baby was happening with or without his involvement. 7 weeks post-breakup, as my pregnancy hit the 17-week mark, I received a series of increasingly frantic texts from Ryan. Is it true? Are you pregnant? Why didn't you tell me? We need to talk immediately. Involves me too. I didn't respond to any of them, not out of spite, but because I truly didn't know what to say yet. I needed to process this new phase, to decide what role, if any, I wanted him to have in our child's life. The text continued, growing more desperate. I have rights, you know. You can't keep my child from me. Call me back or I'm coming over. That last one prompted me to finally respond. I told him not to come to my apartment uninvited, that I would call the police if necessary, and that I would contact him when I was ready to discuss this civilly. He backed off for exactly 2 days, then, as the title of my original post foreshadowed, he showed up. It was just after 11 p.m. I was in bed reading a pregnancy book and making notes when I heard it. A car door slamming, then footsteps on the path to my door, then pounding, not knocking, pounding. And Ryan's voice, slurred but unmistakable. Open the door. I know you're in there. We need to talk about our baby. For a moment I just sat there, heart racing, unsure what to do. Call the police, call Aaron, hide and hope he goes away. Then I heard something that made the decision for me. Crying. Ryan was outside my door, drunk and crying, alternating between demands and pleas. He was saying he made a mistake, asking me to let him in, insisting that it was his baby too. And despite everything he'd done, some small part of me felt not sympathy exactly but recognition. The realization that his grand exit strategy, his new life with Maria, his escape from useless me, none of it was working out as planned. Reality had finally caught up with Ryan, and it had the face of an unexpected baby and financial instability. I got out of bed, put on a robe and approached the door cautiously. I didn't open it, but I spoke through it, telling Ryan he was drunk and should go home, that we could talk tomorrow when he was sober. He shouted that he needed to see me now, needed to see if it was true, if we were really having a baby. I confirmed through the closed door that yes, I was pregnant, 21 weeks now, and yes, it was his, but this wasn't the way to discuss it and he needed to go home. There was a thud against the door, his forehead or fist, I couldn't tell. He mumbled so quietly I almost missed it, that Maria had left him. She said he wasn't who she thought he was, that he'd lied about everything. I couldn't help commenting, that sounds familiar. He laughed, a hollow sound with no humor. He admitted he'd messed up badly and begged me to let him in, saying he just wanted to talk. I took a deep breath, one hand resting protectively on my small bump. I refused to let him in tonight but offered to meet him tomorrow at the cafe on Main Street at 10 a.m. I made it clear that if he wasn't there on time or if he showed up drunk again, that was it. No more chances. He was quiet for so long I thought he might have passed out. Then softly he agreed, tomorrow 10 a.m. I'll be there. I heard him walk away, his footsteps uneven. A car engine started, not his, thankfully. He called a ride. At least he'd done one responsible thing. As I climbed back into bed, my phone lit up with a text from him. I'm sorry for everything, for the party, for the note, for tonight. I'll make it right somehow. I didn't respond. Words were easy. Ryan had always been good with words, but I needed actions now, especially with a baby on the way. Did I still love him? Not anymore. That died the moment he humiliated me in front of our friends. Did I hate him? Not anymore. Hate requires energy I needed for other things. I would meet him tomorrow, I would listen, I would set boundaries, and I would decide, not based on his needs or wants but on what was best for me and my child. And that was when everything became as clear as day. The real work was just beginning. To be continued. Stay tuned for part 2 to find out what happens next. What I discovered was truly shocking. You can't miss this. We'll leave the link right below in the comments and in the description for you to click on it. See you there.